1947, and the German Chancellor Heinrich Brüning, who had been a Chancellor before Hitler. Around about 1928 to 1933, this Chancellor had sat in the highest office in Germany under the President and had watched with great apprehension as the Nazis came to power. And Heinrich Brüning, of course, had known full well who was behind the Nazis and who was financing them during their period in the wilderness. Very interesting question. Was it just the brown shirts? Was it the ordinary man in the street, the 6 million unemployed in Germany? Or who was putting up the money? And Brüning found out who was putting up part of the money to put Hitler into office. And in 1937, in fact, on August the 28th, 1937, Brüning wrote to Winston Churchill a letter about it. This was, of course, 4 or 5 years after Brüning had been tossed out of office. He had taken refuge in England, he was in exile in Oxford, and he wrote a private letter to Mr. Churchill, who was also out of office in the wilderness, like himself, explaining to Churchill who had put up the money for Hitler, the sinister men behind the Nazi rise to power. And Churchill wanted to reproduce this letter, this 1937 letter, in his 6-volume work of memoirs. And you can look in vain in the memoirs, volume 1 or volume 2 or anywhere else, for that letter, because Brüning asked him after the war not to publish the letter, because it was so embarrassing and so painful. I quote the letter. In fact, Brüning wrote to Churchill in 1947 explaining why he didn't want the letter published. And that's the letter that's in the files of Time Life. He says, "I did not and do not even today, for understandable reasons, wish to reveal that from October 1928, the 2 largest regular contributors to the Nazi Party were the general managers of 2 of the largest Berlin banks. Both of, well, he goes on to explain what faith they were of, but I don't want to be accused of anti-Semitism, so I won't say what faith they were. These two people were. One of them was the leader of Zionism in Germany." So writes Brüning in his letter. How embarrassing in 1947 to have to explain that part of the money, a substantial part of the money behind Hitler, mysteriously and inexplicably came from these 2 Berlin bankers. Why? What was the point of it? We don't know, because Churchill bowed to pressure from Brüning. The letter was never published. Brüning, in fact, also reveals that a lot of the money for the Nazis came from French intelligence sources, from certain French arms factories, and that the guns that that were used for equipping the SA and the brown shirts and the SS in those early years before the rise to power largely were provided by Americans, by American arms firms, rather the same as the Americans are providing some of the weapons used by the IRA in Scotland today, in Ireland today. This is the kind of unknown side of the history of the war. And when you see things like that, it begins to make you think. What else is there that we don't know?